Chapter 1. You don't have to cut my foot off, do you? Samson, age 6. I'm going with you, 6-year-old Samson Davis boldly told his big brother, Andre. Samson, with honey gold skin, large eyes with long lashes, and dark curly hair, stood with his feet spread apart and his arms folded across his chest, daring his brother to challenge him. He had learned early to look and act tough, especially with the older boys his brother hung around with. No, man, you too little. You be cramping my style, Andre replied. I don't care. I'm going anyway. Besides, Mom says you gotta watch me today, Samson said, knowing that when their mother said something, she meant business. Both boys knew better than to disobey their mother. She did her best to keep her children in line and had been known to use both broom and belt on them when they broke her rules. Samson also knew his brother hated for him to tag along with the bigger boys. Andre was 10, and he had his own set of friends from the neighborhood. Well, just keep your mouth shut and don't do nothing stupid, Andre warned. Me and my boys got business to take care of. He swaggered a little, making sure his little brother noticed. Samson grinned and ran quickly to join them on the sidewalk. Samson and Andre and his friends liked to pretend to be tough, but not all of it was pretending. Kids learned early in the area around the Dayton Street projects that walking with an air of being in control was often necessary for survival. You hear Pee-wee got beat up last night? Andre asked his friend Leslie as they walked down the street. Yeah, man, he had it coming to him. You don't take money from the bomb and not get tightened up. He's lucky he ain't dead. Samson listened carefully, saying nothing, but taking it all in. Confident he could handle the knowledge of activities of boys much older than he. He didn't think of it unusual at all to be discussing fights and drug deals and muggings. That's just how the world around him functioned. There was no alternative to compare it to. His stomach sometimes tightened with a mixture of fear and excitement, but he didn't let the older boys know it. The group walked down Dayton Street in Newark, New Jersey that summer afternoon, laughing, cussing, and spitting on the sidewalk just to show this little bit of turf belonged to them. They had no particular destination in mind and ended up in a small grassy park not far from the projects. As Samson walked with the older boys, he gloried in the warmth of the lazy afternoon sun. Look at how they keep this place, Andre said with disgust, his voice full of fifth-grade authority. The park was filled with broken glass, battered-up potato chip bags, bottled beers, and other bits of trash. Trash bins all bent up and full of garbage. No wonder nobody comes here. Yeah, look at this mess, Samson said, sounding like a smaller version of his big brother. How's somebody supposed to sit on these park benches? All fallen over and broke? The concrete frames, tilted and no longer braced in the dirt, wobbled easily when the boys tried to set them straight. The green wooden slats that made up the benches' seats and backs lay strewn on the grass. Let's fix the benches, one of Andre's friends said suddenly. We'll be like construction workers. How are we going to do that? Samson asked, intrigued at the game. Easy, man, Andre replied enthusiastically. We got the parts. All we got to do is put them back together. The boys picked up some of the trash, then began to stack the green wooden slats so they could attempt to reassemble one of the benches. Andre grabbed a heavy concrete slab and lifted it with a great deal of difficulty. He called out to his little brother, Yo, Samson, hold this straight, man. The stone slab was a lot heavier than Samson thought it would be as he tried to steady it. He trembled a little from the weight but refused to give up. He felt like it was him against this piece of rock, and he was determined to be stronger than concrete that day. He held it as straight as he could, hoping they would get the wood lined up quickly. You making it wiggle, Samson? No, I'm not. I got it, Samson responded through gritted teeth. The slab tilted even more. Sweat ran from Samson's forehead. His hands were wet with perspiration, which made the piece of concrete harder to hold. Come on, man, hold on, Andre said. We doing the hard work. All you got to do is sit there and hold it steady. Samson had no chance to answer, for at that moment, all 200 pounds of the concrete slab fell forward and landed directly on his foot. At first, he didn't cry out, but then the pain grew from a dull surprise to fierce intensity. My foot! He screamed. He clenched his face so the older boys couldn't see his tears, but finally he just didn't care. He let the tears and screams escape. Dark red blood stained his sneaker and the dusty dirt beneath it. That's when he knew it was bad. Oh, Mom's gonna kill me, Andre cried with fear and worry. Help me get this thing off his foot, he called to his friends. It took 4 fifth-graders to lift the concrete off Samson's crushed foot. Samson looked up at his big brother and at the bright summer sky that seemed so far above him. He felt dizzy. It hurts, Andre, he said softly. Tough it up, man. It's just a little bruise. We gonna get you home now, Andre said, his voice alternating between terror and toughness. He and Leslie pulled Samson from the ground. Can you walk, man? Samson put one foot down, then tried the other. He cringed, cried out, and slumped back against his brother. I can't, he said, shaking his head. Samson took several deep breaths. Sweat poured off his forehead. Andre looked at Leslie. The rest of the boys had somehow disappeared. We gotta carry him, man. Leslie nodded, and the two of them hoisted the smaller boy between them and carried him home, down the same street, which now seemed even hotter. They got to the house, looked around for Moms, then gently set Samson down on the couch. Leslie left quickly, knowing to get out of the way of anybody's angry mother. Samson placed his injured foot on the sofa pillow. Blood seeped through and stained it dark red. We gotta tell Moms, Samson declared. I can't hide this blood very long. She gonna kill us both, Andre said. You first, Samson teased, even though the pain was beginning to intensify now that he was sitting still. Their mother, Ruthiner Davis, came down the steps then, carrying a broom to sweep the living room. She took one glance at the boys, the blood, and the guilty expressions on their faces, and lit into Andre with the broomstick. I told you to keep an eye on your brother, she yelled as the broomstick connected with his butt, at least when she could catch him. What were you doing to almost squash his foot? Have you lost your mind? She screamed and raged, chasing Andre with the broom. Samson said nothing, trying not to let on how much it hurt. Andre finally ran upstairs, and Moms took a closer look at Samson's foot. And you, she said to him, what on earth were you thinking? You should know better. We got to get you to the doctor, boy, before you bleed to death all over my sofa. Lord have mercy, what are y'all going to get into next? At the emergency room of Beth Israel Hospital, dozens of people sat in chairs in the small waiting room. Even though his foot throbbed like lightning and thunder, Samson was fascinated with the place. The energetic and constantly moving nurses, the doctors who seemed so distant and self-assured, the people on the chairs, some patient and hopeful, some obviously in distress. Since his foot was still bleeding and had begun to swell, Samson was called back to the examination room sooner than some of the others who had lesser injuries or illnesses. A tall doctor in a white coat pulled back the thin curtain and walked boldly into the tiny cubicle. He glanced at the chart and looked directly at Samson's bloody foot. Can you fix his foot, doctor? Samson's mother asked immediately. We're going to do our best, ma'am. Let's see what we have here. The doctor took a stethoscope from around his neck and listened to Samson's heart and lungs. He looked in his mouth and ears with a small flashlight. Samson thought that was pretty stupid. It was clear that this doctor didn't know what he was doing, but he was in too much pain to say anything. How'd you hurt your foot, son? The doctor asked gently. Not sure whether he was more afraid of his mother, who would still probably punish him, or this doctor, who obviously didn't know the difference between a chest and a foot. Samson mumbled, A rock fell on it when I was playing. Pretty big rock, the doctor replied. Samson said nothing but watched, fascinated, as the doctor carefully removed his shoe and sock, both sticky with blood. His foot looked like something from a monster movie, swollen and bloody. The doctor picked up his leg, gently touched the areas that hurt the most, then placed it back on the examining table. I'm pretty sure you've got a broken foot, son. You won't be running any races or going to the swimming pool anytime soon. You mean he's going to be laid up all summer? Samson's mother asked with a sigh. He'll be out of the cast and as good as new by the time school starts, the doctor replied with a smile. Dismayed at the thought of missing all the fun and freedom of summer, Samson secretly cursed the concrete in his foot. So, what are you going to do? Samson asked the doctor. First, we get an x-ray. That means we take a picture of the bones in your foot and see exactly where it's broken. I'll let you see the picture. For real? You can see the inside of my foot? Yes, you can see your bones and soft muscle tissue with this kind of picture. Cool, Samson replied, still very much in pain but fascinated with the process. An attendant took him down to the x-ray room where he laid him on another table. The room was darkened and a large machine, which whirled softly, moved above his foot. Samson felt nothing but was amazed at the magic that seemed to surround him. When he was returned to the examining room, he waited patiently for the doctor to come back with the pictures. The doctor came in, smiled, and said, "You've managed to break several bones in your foot, my young friend. You want to see?" Samson watched as the doctor placed the films of his foot on a lighted panel on the wall. The inside of a small foot appeared, with the bones of 5 toes, 5 longer bones in segments, and several other bony structures he couldn't identify. He could clearly see cracks that didn't seem to belong there. "Everything's so even and neat," Samson said, marveling at the picture, "except for the broken part." The doctor, seemingly impressed by the boy's observation, pointed out the bones of the foot and even named them for him. Samson could have looked at the film for hours, but the doctor was busy and had other patients to see. He clicked off the screen and the room returned to normal. "How do you fix something like that?" Samson asked the doctor. "You don't have to cut my foot off, do you?" The doctor laughed. "No, son. We'll have to position your foot so that the bones grow back together correctly. Then, to make sure that the foot stays still and the bones grow right, we'll put your foot in a cast." Samson had seen casts on people before. He'd always secretly wanted one because kids with casts got lots of attention, and other kids got to ride on them. "Cool," he said to the doctor. "I want a light blue one." When Samson arrived back home, instead of being punished, he ended up being the center of attention. He got to stay in his mother's room and watch her television, but best of all, he was served dinner every night, and he didn't have to do any chores. As the summer progressed, the pain subsided. The cast got dirty, and by the time school started in the fall, the cast was off, and he was back running with his friends. He forgot about the adventure in the emergency room that summer. Almost. A conversation with Dr. Samson Davis. Hanging tough. You learn to grow up quickly around the Dane Street projects, where I lived when I was a boy. It was necessary to prove how tough you were, especially in the eyes of the older boys. Hanging out with the older boys was always cool, and I loved being a part of that group, even though it sometimes got me in trouble. Kids often make mistakes and do things that are sometimes foolish or dangerous. Most of the time, just like me, they don't plan to get involved in something they shouldn't. It just happens. My mother, even though she acted like she was very angry at us, was probably really worried that I was seriously injured. When I got home from the hospital, I was treated like a little prince, with extra privileges and freedom from chores. Some say there's a reason for everything. Breaking my foot was the first time I had the opportunity for an in-depth encounter with a doctor. Of course, I couldn't know it at the time, but that experience planted the seeds of interest in emergency medicine. Years later, when I became a doctor, those seeds grew and blossomed. And you know what? I am now working as a doctor in the neighborhood where I grew up. I'm an emergency medicine physician at the same hospital where my broken foot was treated.